Hi, everyone. We are back with Katheryn. She is with Girl on Bliss. And Katheryn, just go ahead. Tell us what you do.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Sure, I'll tell you a little bit. I'm originally from Florida in the US, but I currently live in Tokyo, Japan. So, a lot of my background in holistic nutrition is about the difference between East and West type of nutrition and therapies. So, what I do is I mainly help yo yo dieters and women who are career oriented to help them with weight loss. That's my main focus.
Neat. So, when you say the differences between the Eastern and Western diets, I mean, what is there that you focus on with that?
Oh my goodness, how much time do you have? So basically, I guess I'll just tell you a little bit about my background too and how I wound up getting into this, because I think that that'll give a better idea of why I'm doing this. So when I was living in the US, I was 40 pounds overweight, and I was really trying everything I could to lose weight. I was trying the Weight Watchers, and I was trying high protein, low carb diets, and I was trying calorie counting, and I was eating a lot of salads. I was also binging a lot on the side, but I kind of ignored that part and kept telling myself that, I was trying really hard. I was also exercising a lot, sometimes up to 2 hours per day. I used to do ice hockey. I would go to the gym and do high intensity training and running and weightlifting and just pretty much anything I thought was going to give me a really good burn and, you know, sweat a lot and hopefully burn a lot of calories. And when I came to Japan, I was really confused because all around me were these women who are just really, really slim and tiny, but they were eating all the things that I thought I was not allowed to have on a diet. They were eating noodles and rice, and they're eating literally like a variety of pretty much all different foods. They're going out and having afternoon tea with a little bit of cake in the afternoon. And I was like, you know what? I don't know what they're doing, but and I don't know why it doesn't make sense, but I just want what they have.
Yeah.
So I started studying a little bit more about food energetics, or like the Eastern ways of looking at food and how to combine different foods and how to eat different foods. And I just feel like I stumbled on a different interpretation of the same information. So we have a lot of the same information that's floating around the world of, what it means to be healthy, but how people go about doing it is very different. And I wound up losing 40 pounds eating more kinds of foods than I did when I was like killing myself at the gym and trying to eat only salads back in the United States.
Wow, that is fascinating. So, Katheryn has a free course that you can sign up for on her website, and we will post that in the comments section so that you can all go there and get signed up and get this information. I've actually signed up for it, and I've been looking through the work that you have there, and a lot of the first few lessons are on cycles. I mean, how is
Right.
that different from what we do here in the U.S.?
Okay, so let me just give you like a hypothetical situation. So let's say that you have a bunch of puzzle pieces that you're trying to figure out how to put together. And you just have a pile of pieces there and you're like, how can I make this into a picture? And you have two different ways that you can try to figure out how to make this work. One is you can go to school for 4 years and learn chemistry and learn about atoms and learn about electrons and learn how atoms fit together, and then put every single puzzle piece under a microscope and analyze it and try to see, how these things are going to fit together. Or your second option is to look at the box that the puzzle came in and see what the final picture looks like. And then using your own, eyeballing it and using your own senses, you can kind of try to figure out how to piece everything together. Which one do you think is going to be easier for you to do?
Eyeballing it and looking at the picture.
Yeah, exactly. But if you look at a lot of modern diets in the Western world, we do everything kind of more like the chemistry side of things, where we're looking at calories, protein, carbs, vitamins, minerals, all these things that we can't see, and it's just so narrow that it's really hard for anybody to do intuitively. But the question is, what is this big picture? Like, how are we supposed to just kind of figure out what we need if we don't really know where this picture box is? And that's where cycles come into play. So, blatantly obvious thing that you can do that's really, really easy that people kind of forget about is just eat local seasonal vegetables, because the idea is that you want to balance out your body has to acclimate to the climate that you're in. And if a fruit or a vegetable cannot physically grow where you are, then regardless of nutrient content, it might not be the right kind of nutrition or energy that you need during that time of the year. So what I like to do by teaching people about cycles is to help them put everything into perspective and help them make better decisions that kind of make more sense according to how nature flows. And I think that gives people a lot more confidence, because they're not like over analyzing every individual piece of food. Instead, they're kind of like, oh, I think I can put my trust in nature and these cycles and just see if I can kind of get my body into a better flow.
That's awesome. So you're using a lot of sun and moon and seasons and working through that kind of thing to kind of create a more personalized approach, while at the same time not getting so nitpicky that it becomes overwhelming.
Exactly. I think for the opt-in in particular, I'm trying to introduce people to cycles because I want them to realize that they have a connection to nature, and their body's supposed to be in balance. Like you have the same organs everybody else does. Like, we just got to make sure that it functions properly, and things are going to balance themselves out. It's not the core of what I teach, which is food energetics, but I think that it's a really good segue to kind of open people's minds up to a holistic approach instead of a scientific approach.
So tell me a little bit more about food energetics. And I mean, is this a constitutional thing where you're looking at somebody's constitutional state and, whether they're hot, cold, et cetera, and trying to work the food towards that? Or is there something else going on? What's happening there?
So food energetics, for people who are listening and don't know about it, it's the study of how foods affect our body based on how it grows in nature. So, for example, a banana would grow in a tropical environment. So it's said in Eastern nutrition that those types of fruits are going to be cooling off our body in a hot climate. So that kind of goes along with the cycles too, and eating seasonal vegetables is that you want to make sure that you're balancing out your body chemistry. So we kind of use those concepts of the heating and cooling, but also other ones like expansion and contraction. So to give you an example, have you ever taken salt and you sprinkled it on, let's say, cabbage, for example? What happens to the cabbage if you just let it sit there for like 30 minutes with the salt on it?
Up, would it not?
Yeah, so it shrinks up and then the water is drawn out.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that if we're eating a lot of very heavy animal products or salty foods, then the same type of concept happens to our organs internally, our intestines internally, is that it becomes very tight, and then the fluid kind of comes out. So that's one concept about contraction. The opposite of contraction is expansion, and someone who has too much expansion are things like inflammation. So things like sugar is pretty much what people would consider the opposite of salt, right? Is things that are inflammatory and create expansion. So if you're helping people, if you just tell people this is not going to help with inflammation, then it's kind of confusing for them to understand how to make good decisions. But if you talk about contraction and expansion, then they can start to understand, oh, when I feel very tense, that's when I start to crave sugar. So if I can just avoid feeling very tense, be it emotionally or physically or eating very, very salty foods, then I'm probably not going to crave the sugar as much. So we start looking at the root cause more than just telling people to cut out sugar. We're trying to help them identify where is that sense of tension or contraction coming from, so that they can kind of feel more relaxed and not have those really intense cravings that they usually do.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You need to come talk to my students about this. This is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you get from learning about all this for yourself and then shifting it over into helping other people? I mean, at what point did you decide you wanted this to be your career?
Well, I remember just walking the streets of Tokyo and looking around and thinking to myself, why don't more people know about this? Like I was in the US driving myself crazy trying to figure out all of this diet stuff. And the thing is, I had heard about holistic nutrition, but I didn't trust it because I felt like in modern diets, you have a plan where they're like, okay, do steps 1, 2, 3, and you'll lose 20 pounds in X amount of days. Whereas holistic nutrition is like, feel your way, just eat intuitively. And I was like, well, like I want to listen to my body, but my body's telling me to stuff my face with a bag of cookies. So I don't really know if I can trust that. And I just didn't really connect with the holistic stuff that I was reading about in the US, even though I liked it. But I felt like if I could help people understand it from this perspective, that it's something that they'd be able to approach anywhere. And so I was always really interested in trying to figure out how I could get the message out. So I wound up going to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Since I'm based in Tokyo, that was a really great program for me because I could do it online for 1 year. And once I got certified, I decided that instead of doing it as a hobby on the side, I kind of want to make it my full-time gig. So then I made the transition to just doing it full-time.
Awesome. What do you feel like was the hardest thing for you getting started as a practitioner?
Oh, I definitely thought that all I had to have was just a website that said, "Hey, I'm awesome. Come pay me." And then people would just show up and then be like, "Oh, I want to learn this awesome thing." But I definitely think marketing has been so hard, especially because I'm teaching something people haven't heard about. So I need to attract them by using things they have heard about and then educate them after they come to my website. So there's been like a kind of an obstacle there about trying to get the message out about something people don't really know anything about. Also, yeah, I would just say just building up a following and getting the message out has been probably very challenging.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I think a lot of practitioners and people who are interested in becoming practitioners can relate to that because we are a lot of the times doing something that's a little far out for most people, or it's different.
Right.
It's they're not quite where we usually, are. And so like bridging that gap between where we are and where people are and meeting them there and helping them move
Exactly.
can be kind of a tricky thing.
I also think that's another tough thing that happened when getting started is that you want to help so many people, but there's so many people who are just not ready to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back when I was at my heaviest weight and I was like doing protein, carbs, and calories and, counting everything, if someone told me to just keep my body warm and that would help with weight loss, I've been like, yeah, right, And I still have a lot of people who make those negative comments on things that I post publicly because it's such a saturated market that there's a lot of opinions out there. So I think just getting comfortable with trying to get your message out, despite the fact that you're going to have naysayers, it was also a challenge too.
That's interesting. So, do you think that it's because the fitness industry here is so like people are just so ingrained in a certain way that they just it angers them to hear somebody try something different? I mean, is that what's going on, or what do you feel like?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily that they get angry about hearing like an alternative method. I just think that it's so prevalent in like the media and just what everybody around you is doing. It's like a cultural thing. It's like, people going to the gym is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Here, I don't really see people go to the gym. Maybe I see them go to yoga. Maybe I see them walk outside. I see them go to the hot springs and take a nice bath. So there's a lot more body care oriented, methods that they use. Whereas in America, it's all about going to the gym. It's all about counting your whatever calories, macros, whatever they need to count.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when you grow up in that environment where that's all people have been doing, then hearing something else that sounds so simple, but kind of like something that would make you in disbelief, like, wait a second, that can't possibly be easier than counting calories, because counting calories actually makes sense. It logically makes sense. So why would I do something that sounds like ridiculously too easy? It can't be that easy is I think what people think. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. So what do you do? I mean, like, how do you get over it when somebody makes negative comments? I mean, is it really just kind of like, oh no, that's not, or did they attack you? I mean, like, where does that end up?
I think it used to really upset me when I first got started. Like, it was one of the things that kind of made me question over and over why I'm doing it. because I really I don't like confrontation. So to be on a forum and to try to give a positive message and see someone say something very negative it was really hard at first, especially because I would be in public forums and I would invite people to something and be like, hey, I'm going to do a webinar on this topic for food energetics. If you're interested, come sign up. And then some random person will be like, what's food energetics? And then I'll be like, okay, I just tell them a little bit about that. And they're like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Weight loss is all about calories in versus calories out, blah, 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 blah. And then there's like, I remember one guy he would gather all these articles like that he had read on some research website, and he was like posting them all in the comments. And I was like, I can't even reply to this guy because I'm just going to fuel his need to, prove me wrong. And I was like, I'm the one here who's certified and he's just like working out in his home gym. And it's interesting. But on one hand, I kind of had to realize that people just want to be heard, or, people have been in situations where they've tried things and they haven't worked, and it just doesn't make sense to them to do something that doesn't have like a logical progression, because they're like, how could that possibly work if everything else I've done hasn't worked? Mm-hmm. They think that they need to get more strict after that. So I just have to remind myself that people are at different stages, and maybe one day they'll think about it later in their life, but right now it's just better to just leave it alone and just focus on the people who are interested in my stuff.
Yeah, and that's good to hear that, because, and some people have more resistance because, like you mentioned, like people are just so used to this, what they see as a much more logical pattern, which I would argue that it's not particularly, it's just a different type of logic.
Exactly.
But it is good to hear that, it just gets to a point where you just get focused, and it is important to have that mindset. And I think that's something that can be hard for people to just remember, that like you're going to, on occasion, have somebody say something. I mean, I have not had too much backlash for what I'm doing, but but there are different fields where it can be a stronger backlash, and at that point you have to make up your mind to plow through it and focus on the positive and all these people who are saying good things, because it will start to flourish like you're talking about.
Exactly.
Sorry to just kind of like run off on that tangent, but it's good to hear. Yeah. One thing you mentioned was that marketing was kind of difficult at first, getting out and getting your message out. What kinds of things are you doing to really kind of push, to find people who are resonating with what you're teaching?
Okay. So for people who are listening, for my particular situation, I'm living in a country where people don't speak English. So my main focus is to reach people on the internet, online. So my entire business is all online. I think I would do things differently if I didn't have to worry about that. So if I was living in the United States, I would probably be contacting local health organizations or going to networking events and doing those types of like more local methods of getting seen. But since I'm only focusing online, the things that have really been helping the most have been writing for publications. So I'm on everything from the Huffington Post to Mind Body Green, the Elephant Journal, Thrive Global. That's the new company from Arianna Huffington, and also Elite Daily. So whenever I write for those companies, I really like it because they get my material in front of people, and it's instead of trying to focus on like growing your blog and then just waiting or hoping someone's going to come and see it, or trying to focus on SEO, keyword search in a very saturated market based on what people are searching for. Instead, I can write something that sounds kind of controversial and then put it up on a platform in front of people that will catch their attention as they're going through their feed. And then they can read about it. And if they like it, then they can come to my website, and they already have that trust factor, or that, I already have that credential of being on that website. So I would say that method for me has been really helpful in terms of trying to get something out that is like not something people are really searching for. Also, just talking to different people in Facebook groups has been really helpful. Having friends who have been part of like my beta test and have them go out and talk to other people, having testimonials has been really helpful too. So, just doing those different types of marketing has been great. That's
cool. So, you mentioned getting on the Huffington Post and things like that. how hard was it to get published? I mean, did you have to submit several articles before somebody was interested, or like what did you do to kind of grow up to the level of Thrive Global? I mean, that's awesome.
Well, I think a lot of people have mentioned that it's hard to get on those publications, but I feel like my material has been so unusual. You know, talking about food energetics is something that they probably don't really come across. So for me, it hasn't really been that challenging. I would say that there's some platforms that have, instead of just saying no, they come back to me and they say, Katheryn, can you actually go into more detail here, or can you explain this? And so some of them have been helpful with trying to like get me to get more information out. And I realized that if you are thinking about writing for publications, the more raw you can write your story, like to the point where you are almost like nervous that someone's going to read this and like just be like find you out. Those are the ones that usually get more attention. So for example, writing for the Elephant Journal, I wrote about how coming to Japan, there's a lot of the clothing stores don't have clothing label sizes. So, you know, being in an environment where I could actually pick clothes based on what felt right instead of picking the one based on the clothing label helped me connect with my body more, because I wasn't concerned about fitting into a smaller pair of pants. I was just concerned with picking the one that actually felt right. So, you know, those kind of like vulnerable pieces are ones that I think get a lot more attention if you're writing about a topic that doesn't seem to be super unique.
Gotcha. So you're thinking along the lines of like being just vulnerable and raw about your writing, and also if they can get in, if people can get into kind of like a real unique niche with what they're doing that catches people's eye. That's really cool. I just love it.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing with this. So do you speak Japanese? I mean, are you able to converse with people in the area about what you're doing, or do you
I do speak Japanese, yes.
Oh, awesome. Yay.
Right.
Do you find that there are a lot of people over there that are focused on this particular rhythm, or is the Western idea of diet taking over? Or
Well, I would say both, because I do think that there's a lot of Japanese people who don't know why the Japanese diet is so great. So, you know, a lot of the traditional Japanese diet is kind of set up in a way that follows this food energetics concept. So I think a lot of people think that Japanese diets are healthy because, oh, they've got miso, which is probiotics. Oh, they drink green tea. But like, no, it's not really about the specific ingredients. It's about how they go together and what category of ingredients those are, because you can totally copy it if you're outside of Japan. But I do see a lot of, especially younger girls who are diet conscious, they don't really realize that how, you know, important maybe eating just a traditional Japanese meal could be, because it really flows into that overall concept. And I do see a lot of Western concepts kind of creeping up over here. So, you know, when I first came here, there was no green juices, there was no green smoothies, nobody knew what a chia seed was. And now, like, I can see it in supermarkets. I can see the little cafes that are, you know, juice bars, and I feel like it's starting to kind of grow over here. But Japan is definitely kind of slow compared to other countries in terms of picking up on these trends. But yeah, I do see like that influence is coming on over here.
wow. So do you feel like being in Japan kind of helps to inspire you? I mean, like I'm big into the idea of having an online business and also doing some stuff locally, but really, like, if you can set yourself online, then you can go anywhere and do anything. Do you feel like being in Japan kind of inspires you to continue your work, or is that even, am I reaching here?
I definitely feel like I don't really know how to answer that, because I think like it's, you know, I've always been influenced by, you know, how I've been living here. And when I talk to people online, it just kind of reminds me or reinforces me or my thoughts about how things are different. So I feel like I'm so used to it that I don't really necessarily feel inspiration on a daily basis. But I do think that there's moments where I do kind of reflect on how things are different and how I can communicate that to other people. Yeah.
Cool. So what else would you like for our viewers to hear? I mean, is there any advice you'd like to give, or any parting words, as it were?
Okay, so you mean like any types of advice for business marketing, or what type of
or
topic?
or just people in general, whatever you feel moved to talk about.
Okay. I think if you're trying to start an online business, I would definitely start with just trying to grow your following and working on your main core message. Those are the two things I think are probably the most important. Like you don't want to wait too long and, focus on your website or focus on your content first. Like make sure that you're actually attracting people before you start really getting into designing things and creating things, because that'll kind of give you a leeway to kind of have people to offer your items to when they're ready.
Nice. Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because I do want to say real fast that I believe that building an email list is one of the best things you can do, because then you get
Definitely.
feedback from people about what you're doing and whether or not it's resonating or what you've got to tweak. So, well,
Yeah,
thank
and
you
it
so
doesn't
much.
have to be perfect because things
Exactly.
are always changing. Like your thoughts are changing, the needs are changing. So, yeah.
Yeah. I literally just had this conversation with someone else about
Right?
how, because we are works in progress, what we're doing is always going to be a work in progress.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Katheryn. Katheryn is with Girl on Bliss. So that's girlonbliss.com. And like I said, we will post the link in the notes. It's 7 ridiculously easy weight loss tips for career women. And there is a free course, and it's amazing. I have gone through it. I think it's great. Thank you again, Katheryn. We appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.